In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how Aviatrix integrates with Microsoft Entra GSA. Here you can see the topology that we'll be deploying. We have Microsoft Entra GSA, Global Secure Access, that provides us with access to services like Microsoft 365, the internet, potentially private resources like our headquarters or data center, and other IaaS and PaaS services. What we're going to do in this demo is deploy a pair of Aviatrix transit gateways that we can see at the bottom over here, and they're deployed in Azure, and they're going to connect as a remote network to Microsoft Global Secure Access. In order for us to be able to deploy those transit gateways, we need the Aviatrix control plane deployed. The Aviatrix control plane consists of a controller and copilot, and this is required because Aviatrix is a software-defined networking solution. So we have our central controller that actually deploys and manages all of the infrastructure, and Copilot that is responsible for providing us with a management plane, a UI that allows us to see what's going on and configure the environment. The first thing we're going to do is access the Entra Admin Center, and there we're going to browse to the Global Secure Access section, navigate to Third-Party Security Solutions, Marketplace, and we would see the Aviatrix Enterprise offering listed. Click Get It Now. On the right hand side, again, click on Get It Now. Select the account under which you want to register the license. And on this page, fill out the details. Review your settings and hit subscribe when you're ready. After a few moments, the Configure Account Now button becomes available. And on the subscription page, submit your details. Once you see this message, you should receive an email with your customer ID. The email you've received should look like this. And on the top of the email, you should find your controller customer ID. Make sure you save that string for later use. Now that we have our licensing sorted, we can start to deploy our control plane. And for that, we're going to use Terraform, and specifically the Azure Control Plane Terraform module. We can find the source code for this module on GitHub. And if we scroll down, we can see a usage example. I've already set up the code in this folder control plane. We have a main.tf Terraform file. We can see the code that resembles the example that we saw before here. I'm using a couple of variables to pass in these values, so they're obscured. But you can feed them in through a TF-vars file. But my actual values set up here in my TF-vars file. But I'll show you this example. So it takes a password, the IP address from the connection we're using, our internet connection, an email address, and the customer ID that we just obtained by email. By setting this up in the TF-vars file, these variables will automatically be populated and this module will automatically use them. Okay, so we're ready to deploy this. Let's enter this folder. Initialize the Terraform. Now that Terraform has initialized, we can execute the code. Now that the deployment is complete, we can take the Copilot public IP address and we can browse to it using HTTPS. Log in using the username admin and the password that we've configured in the Terraform. So now we have finished setting up the control plane. We can start deploying our transit gateways and the connection to Entra GSA. We are going to use another Terraform module for setting up the connection. The Aviatrix Microsoft Entra SSE module facilitates the connection to GSA. We can see an example down here. So we're going to use a different module, the MC Transit module, to actually create our pair of transit gateways. And then this module will be used to deploy the remote network connection. As you can see, this module requires the Azure Tenant ID, Client ID, and Client Secret. In order to obtain these, we need to create an app registration. So let's head to our Entra Admin Center, Identity, Applications, App Registrations. I have already created the app registration that I'm going to be using in Terraform, but you can easily create one by clicking New Registration, give it a clear name, select the correct account type, and click Register. Since I already have created the app registration, let's look at it. This app registration needs to be given the correct permissions to administer the GSA settings. Go to API Permissions and make sure you add the permissions for network access read all and network access read write all. Once you've done that, we'll need to create a secret for this app registration. Go to Certificates and Secrets and create a new client secret. Give it a name and an expiration date and click on Add. Once you've done that, you'll be presented with the secret ID and the secret value. Make sure to write these down. You'll need them for the Terraform code. Also, go back to Overview and obtain the client ID and the tenant ID. Now that we have obtained the details for the app registration, we can configure our Terraform module. So going back to our code, we are done with our control plane. So I'll just close that up, close these files. And I've got another folder here that contains the code for deploying our transit gateways, as well as the connection to Entra. As you can see, we have the code here as resembled in the example. We have the module that deploys our transit gateways and the module that will create the remote network connection to Entra GSA. I'm using a couple of variables here again to set the Azure Tenant ID, Client ID, and Client Secret. As you can see in the module, I'm referencing these variables. And again, I've got the actual values for these variables set up in my TFVars file. But if you want to see what it actually looks like, I have this example for you. I've got my Azure Tenant ID, Client ID, and Client Secret filled out in this file. And I also have the controller admin password set up. We need that in our provider configuration. So I've got a file provider.tf that contains the provider configuration. Again, it's got that variable defined. It tells Terraform which provider we need to download for interacting with the Aviatrix controller. And it has the Aviatrix controller details set up. So referencing the variable controller admin password to set up the password, the username admin, and the controller IP we've obtained from the control plane module outputs. So we have controller public IP that we'll fill out in this provider section. With that, we're ready to deploy this. So let's go to the correct folder. Let's initialize Terraform. And now we are ready to execute the Terraform code. Now that Terraform has successfully created the resources, we can go to Copilot and check the configuration. In Copilot, browse to networking, connectivity. And we can see we have our AVX SSE East US tunnel configured with BGP over IPsec, status up. If I expand it, I can see I've got 2 tunnels, one from each of the transit gateways to Entra GSA. If we click on the connection, we can see more details. For example, which prefixes we have learned over BGP to prove that we really have an established BGP connection. We can also check the connectivity on Microsoft side. We go back to the Entra Admin Center under Global Secure Access, connect remote networks. We can see our remote network definition. And if we expand that, we can see both tunnels defined here. I hope you've enjoyed this demo.